Welcome to Sanguine Arts Locavart, the podcast that features interviews with local Twin Cities artists. This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. I am your host, interdisciplinary performance artist Mary Prescott. Today, we are speaking with deVon Russell Gray, improviser, composer, burgeoning spatialized sound installation artist, and a recently self-identified neuro artist trying to heal himself and then others through sound. Who is deVon Russell Gray? A divinely guided multimedia social justice activist or a pantheistic audio alchemist? Central to his creative practice is the fundamental belief of starting from a place of I know nothing when approaching any new composition, performance, or creative endeavor. Embracing the idea that empty vessels receive new knowledge more efficiently, he constantly seeks a transformative death-rebirth process to expand his artistic horizons. Among other known knowns about this artist, Gray absorbs tremendous inspiration from the natural world, finding solace and reflection in the great outdoors. He cherishes moments of indulgence in eating, drinking, and merriment, and he possesses a deep appreciation for activities such as moon gazing, leaf peeping, and immersing himself in the world of cinema. In his downtime, he reluctantly participates in the commonplace mixed economy, feeling frustrated by its limitations and yearning for something different. In his uptime, he creates exceptional art while also taking every opportunity to integrate himself in tent camping adventures. Gray's improvisation trio released their debut album titled We Sick on Inova in April 2023, featuring Nathan Hansen on saxophones, Davu Seru on percussion, and Gray on piano. Additionally, Gray made his mark as a composer with the lead single on Lara Down's album Love at Last, which reached #1 on the Billboard Classical and Classical Crossover charts. Furthermore, his orchestral work was premiered by one of the groups of the Greater Twin Cities Youth Symphonies, a significant moment that brought his journey full circle as an alumnus of the organization. Welcome, deVon. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation.
I'd like to start our interview by asking you about your extended bio, which I didn't read out loud during the intro, but which I think says a lot about you, and it bears a deeper conversation. In that extended bio, you write that you find yourself at odds with paper music, and also that you understand music's power to address socially relevant subjects. Can you say a little bit more about those ideas and how they might be related for you?
I have what I've come to understand as a pretty typical musical education, musical training in this country, where the emphasis is on making things because you have the ability to make things, as opposed to making things because you have something to say, or you have a story or an issue to address. So, as part of my great unlearning, which means letting go of the Eurocentric theory and history and education that was part of my education, I'm just not happy with a lot of my training. I'm not happy with the way we're taught to communicate. Paper music has limitations. We've always known that. And I've allowed myself to be guided and shaped by my friends and my associations, and there's more expressive power in free improvisation for me, so that's the track that I've been following. So where I have found success is, instead of relying on traditional notation, I create scores and compositions based around improvisation and find new ways to engage with performers, players, friends, and ensembles with what is called guided improvisations. I still love some of the ideas that I have, or some of the ideas that I will have, and I understand that some of those ideas will be best mined through something that's more akin to traditional notation. I'm not necessarily chasing melodies or concerned with chord progressions or harmonic movements or structures, but I'm not opposed to those things. It could happen. I can wake up one day with with a melody on my heart.
Yeah.
Like in earlier moments in this life. But at the moment, that's just not the way. I answered at least part of your question.
You talk about an I know nothing approach to music making, and with you talked about this a little bit with your extensive knowledge and your practical experience. How do you tap into the mindset of starting from zero? And or to put it another way, how do you empty your mind so that it will be ready to be refilled?
Fortunately for me, the way my mind works, I feel like I don't have to do much of anything except desire for the thing that was in there to go away, and then it goes away. I, you know, had years and had years
That's
and
funny.
years of being a side man and playing other people's music, and so you jam pack your mind with a whole set of someone's songs or music, and as soon as the performances are done, or as soon as my body knows that it's done, I wake up the next day and it's kind of hard for me to remember the changes, remember the forms. It's like I go into the dream world and I hit refresh. Uh, Perhaps I've also tapped into some tools through my meditation process or through, um, I don't know, other ceremonies of release. I had a friend ask the other day, how do I get over the intimidation of a blank page or a blank piece of manuscript paper? I don't have answers to that other than at some point you just put something down. You have to start somewhere. Um, but usually it's, the scraps of paper and the notes that that offer the starting point or a
Hmm.
voice memo.
Hmm. And if you reject paper music, then
Yeah, exactly.
then you're good to go. This past year, you produced a gorgeous project at the Walker Art Center called In the Year of the Parable. Can you tell me a little bit more about that project? How did it come about? What were your ideas behind it? And who did you work with on that project?
I love the clear moments when you understand how a gig found you. One of my responsibilities as a McKnight recipient was to participate in the midwinter concert offering. And I loved that opportunity. It was at the beloved Cedar Cultural Center, a very modular space that's capable of many things. And I wanted to try something new. So I wired the piano, the acoustic piano, the grand piano tuned to my specifications. Thank you to the Schubert Club for providing that instrument. So I wired the piano through a pedal board of, guitar pedals and effects. Never done that before. It was a challenge to figure out the routing and the wiring, but after a couple of failed attempts, we got it. Um, and that particular set, I was making an offering to the trees. I've been thinking about trees a lot over the last several years in different contexts. But that night, it was more the darker half of that journey, thinking about the complicity of trees in atrocious acts like lynching, and wondering what the trees' philosophies are, what the trees' emotional state is after those sorts of events. Trees don't get to uproot and walk away and leave the scene of the atrocity. They have to remain there and live their best lives. But I imagine trees, much like myself, are able to just shake things off, that they're able to, through the mycelium network, release and get the acceptance that they need, and also understand I didn't choose this. Evil people came and used my structure, used my being. So I told the audience that night, I am just the vessel. I am here as the voice of those trees. And I don't know where this journey is going to take us, but here we go. Here comes some free improvisation in the form of tree speak. Um, and it was a beautiful set.
Hmm.
I didn't play complicated things. I played simple things. But again, I felt like I wasn't making any choices. It's a lesson I learned from local elder and artist Tacumba Aiken, who says when he's making his canvases, he's not in control of the paintbrush. It's the ancestors speaking through him, through his hands, through his arms, through his brush. I believe the same for me when I open those portals and ask for that guidance. One of the folks in attendance that night was Doug Bennett. who's the co-curator of performance art things at the Walker. He loved the set. He loved the the connection to the trees. He's also a tree guy, and he made the offer for me to participate in their Sound and Silence event, an
Hmm.
event which I love because I love moving images and I love the opportunities musicians have to rescore things or to score things that have no score.
Hmm. And this was a score to a silent film, right?
Correct. I had access to their moving image library and the assistance of one of their moving image co-curators, and I had a feeling going into it that I wasn't going to find much of what I was looking for in their archives, in their collection. And that was a simple thing I was looking for. I was looking for black folks, brown folks in nature having a good time, and they had pretty much none of that. But I found things that were beautiful to me, things that were engaging, things that had humans in nature or human behind the lens looking out at nature, and found my way to a happy montage of things.
Hmm. What did
And
you? Oh,
sorry,
sorry. Go ahead.
and the theme came to me without me having to look very far. I'm a big Octavia Butler fan. I had been rereading The Year of the Parable, and I said, "Oh, look at that! The story starts in July of 2024." And I was still working on the commission in July of 2024. The premiere is August 2024. I said, okay, that's really relevant. That
That's all.
here's
That's more than a coincidence.
yeah. Here's the framework. Thank you, Sister Elder, Ancestor Butler.
Can you tell us a little bit about the ensemble that you put together for it and how those people came together?
Um, you mentioned my trio mates already, Nathan Hansen and Dabu Seru. I try to make as much music with them as possible. So anytime there's a gig offer and enough change on the table, I will invite my brothers to join me. I also extended an invitation to my dear friend Andrew Broder, who is a beautifully talented polymath and polyglot. He's comfortable in any situation. He's a beautiful DJ. He's a beautiful songwriter, beautiful musician, a great singer, a great producer. I He asked me what I wanted him to do, and I said, just come, sit at the table, and bring yourself. And lastly, as part of the performing ensemble, was dear friend Ariadne Grief, who, again, is a new music performer and is often asked to make someone else's paper music come to life, make someone's, heavily notated, highly curated piece come to life, and she's very skilled at that. I wasn't offering that. I was offering her the opportunity to join the improvisers circle, to just come and to bring herself, bring her freedom of expression, and to make an offering alongside the rest of us. She loved that invitation because it's rare that she gets that sort of freedom. And yeah, she brought her genius, and it was beautiful.
Hmm.
The last folks involved were my friends James Everest and Eli Stone, who were wrangling one of the spatialized speaker array uh, pieces. In that instance, it was the final commission from my Schubert Club residency, work I call New Selma. So we took the stems from that original recording and spatialized the elements through a couple dozen speakers. And because of all of last year's wildfires on the West Coast and in Canada, Minnesota had record amounts of rain through June and July. So this event at the Walker, which is supposed to take place outdoors on the hillside, couldn't happen in the space it was meant to happen in because the hillside was a muddy mess.
Hmm.
So we were moved indoors to the McGuire Theater. Sad because we had to turn away a lot of folks. There's, limited capacity in the theater. But on the positive end, the recording turned out amazing. Outside, we would have had to deal with, the noise floor of that area, and there's a highway nearby, sirens, and everything else would have been a mess. But inside, we had control. So I had the sonic installation going before doors, so as people entered the theater, they were already being immersed in that work. And then the top of the set dovetailed with Eli and James slowly removing the speaker installation one by one. It was really beautiful.
Hmm. Sounds amazing. I mean, I listened to the whole track recording of it, and it was amazing hearing it that way too. But I wish I could have been in that space.
At some point, I'll recombine the two pieces. I'll put the soundtrack back together with the moving images reel, so it lives as that testament. But it also lives in the Walker's archive as we performed it.
Just because I know her, I just want to shout out to Ariadne too for her whistling in that piece. She's an incredible whistler.
She's an incredible whistler. She's a whistler from a bygone era.
You were recently approached by the American Composers Forum to write a piece about America's semi-quincentennial. What have you been thinking around that project and its subject matter, and what are your plans for approaching it? Who might your collaborators be, and how are you determining who you'd like to work with on it?
I loved the prompt that they offered, which was wide open. It's basically create something in response to America's living birthday. So it's on me how I choose to interpret what that means. I want it to be more than a no-brainer. Obviously, as a black man in America, I could go in a handful of directions where it's just all piss and vinegar, vitriol. I could occupy the negative space and remain there because there's so much nastiness that this country's had to offer in its existence. But for me, no peace of mind is complete without the balance. So if I spend 15 minutes dealing with nasty, then I'll have to spend 15 minutes dealing with epic beauty. And there's so much beautiful in this country that I can also reflect on. So at this moment, I'm still at the beginning stages of research and wrapping my mind around what I might do with this opportunity to soapbox and to storytell. I want to spend some time doing some research on some of the communities that we know thrived and existed that were burned to the ground by murderous white mobs of racists, or some of the communities that were destroyed by land projects or highways, or, you know what, we need a reservoir here, says the federal government, and this community needs to go away. It doesn't matter if it came from the federal government or from a amped up murderous mob. At the heart of it is racism. At the heart of it is othering. At the heart of it is we are afraid of this beautiful black, brown community, and that being an entity that thrives and is surrounded by love and well-being irks us. So we need it to go away. That will be part of the story. My piece is tentatively called Let Me Bear Witness the Only Way I Can. And that'll remain the title until some poet or author I'm reading shows me a better way. I also, if I can make it happen before the end of this commission window, would love to get to travel a bit. Would love to get to the other side of the slave trade, spend a moment in Africa. I would love to spend a moment in Spain or other places in Europe where slave ships had portage or had some sort of a moment on their journey to the States. I will spend some time doing some research here at the Gibbons Collection which is now curated by deVon at the U of M. And I have an unexpected trip to Mississippi coming up next week. And I don't know that I'll necessarily do any hands-on research, but it's just always good for my soul to be in that space. I'm the first generation of my family born in the North, born in Minnesota. My parents are both from Mississippi. And as far back as anyone has done any research in my family, we're Mississippi. So I'm also hoping that during this commission process, I'll do some research and do some ancestry DNA tests and figure out where we hailed from before Mississippi. So that's what I know so far. Folks that I want to be involved in the project as performers, deVon, Nathan for sure. My friend Melvin Gibbs is a beautiful bass player, composer. He's in a trio that I love called Harriet Tubman. Their music is soul-stirring, and the grooves are just so deep. Oh my God. So tasty, so tasteful, so delicious. And there's the possibility of wrapping in other commission projects into this project and making it bigger, but I'll leave that well-wishing for another moment when when it's facts and not just dreams.
Well, I hope it all comes through for you in the way that you desire it. When do you expect that you'll be presenting the work?
I think the main goal for me for the work is for it to be in the form of an album. And as far as a public presentation, it'll happen in Minnesota first, so in the home communities. And then I would love the opportunity to tour it a little bit. Still things to work out, but there are interested parties here in the Twin Cities for sponsorship and more programming. So we shall see.
Looking at the bigger picture, what's your plan and what's your outlook? What's the known? What's the unknown?
Right now, the known is deVon trying to go back to school. deVon has grown tired of being out here in these streets as an independent, struggling artist, and would like the auspices of an institution for a moment. Again, I've been thinking about going back to school for a long time, since I left school, but I wanted the circumstances and the situation to be just so. One, I'm glad it's 2 decades later because I want to study things worlds away from what I would have studied coming out of conservatory. Coming out of conservatory, I would have remained on that track. But these years later, I'm understanding that I'm more of a Black Studies scholar than I ever recognized. I'm more of an ecologist than I ever recognized. I've always known, I was a good little Cub Scout and Boy Scout and had my introductions to nature and to leaving a space better than you found it. But, life's. And it points you in directions when it knows you're ready. So this self-identification as a neuro artist, that's just new in the last weeks and months.
Mm-hmm.
I am absolutely fascinated by the possibility of the sounds that I make being healing. I mean, they already are. Even if we're talking about, equal temperament, piano, and regular tuned things, there's still healing in there. But I want to know how deep the healing can go. If the tunings are different, and if the frequencies and frequency ranges are different, then our physiology will respond differently. Our nervous systems will respond differently. I've been thoroughly enjoying music at 417 hertz. Recently, I've expanded to 396 hertz, and the journey will continue. I will keep going until I find something that really resonates with me. So what I understand about my near future is there's going to be a lot of experimentation my electronic rig at the moment, which you've had the privilege of jamming with me a few times. The heart is the Lyra 8, which they call an organismic synthesizer. Has 8 oscillators, so basically 8 voices, which I tune individually, which means there's more freedom. But I can tune these things to these different frequency ranges, to different sorts of harmony, different sorts of tones. And especially if I'm at home in headphones, it just feels good to me. And then putting that rig through a system with good speakers and good subs, we can really, intimidate and impress upon someone else's torso or their body. It's I love that. I love that power. It's a privilege, and I just want to be responsible with it. My favorite comments to get these last months with this rig, unsolicited, people will come up to me and say, "Do you know that your sounds are healing?" I think I do, and I'm glad that that's coming across to those who are open to it. So near future is more education, more research, more time in the lab, more time in modular synthesis labs. Again, just to see what's possible out there. More tunings, more weird things, more exploration of the way things are tuned in the rest of the world. The West and the States were so homogenized and so equal and out of relationship with the natural world, and I want to get back to what's natural. And in the longer term, I am just trying to make great art that allows me pure freedom of expression to live in a way that is stress-free. So for me, that means an eventual countryside lifestyle. The city is too stressful for me. I will never abandon my communities, but I would love to be someone who gets to exist in multiple places, gets to live in multiple spaces.
Lay your eyes on some nature.
Concrete doesn't do it for me.
I once watched from above some sidewalk layers, and watching them pour and smooth that concrete was just a thing of beauty. I was so absorbed in it. I took a video. I was like, I love this.
That's funny. Yeah, me too. Every time I walk past or ride my bike past someone's driveway being laid or concrete being poured, I stop. It is mesmerizing.
Yeah, it's craft.
Yes. I also love when that concrete is overrun by nature, when the trees and the plants come back. Crack it up, bring back the earth.
And it's beautiful too when a leaf falls onto the wet cement and then makes a little lasting imprint there. It's like, joke's on you.
But we gonna be here. The trees and leaves are still gonna be here when this concrete has returned to dust.
That's right. You talk a little bit about this in your bio too, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit on who or what you're inspired by.
I'm inspired by my friends. I'm inspired by you. I'm inspired by fearless people. I'm inspired by folks who don't allow their voices to be muted or obscured or ignored. I talk about the great unlearning, and generally I'm talking about my education specifically, but there's also a lot of emotional baggage that I need to let go of. The patriarchy is nasty. Our capitalist society is nasty, so there's a lot to let go of, a lot to unlearn in search of the freedom that I seek for myself and for my loved ones. So I find inspiration in the artists who make their work based on those things, based on defiance of structure, defiance of government, defiance of systems. That people ask all the time, do you see a future for America when it's equitable and loving. And no, I can't see that future, but I know it's possible. And for me, how we get to some of that possibility is through the destruction of some of the things that exist now that are destructive and mean. Um, Status quo is not the way. Status quo needs to go, and it starts, or it happens one step at a time. So for me, it's one piece at a time. It's one new work of art at a time. It's one new essay at a time. It's one new community conversation at a time. It's one more event of solidarity and seeking justice. As I sit here talking to you, I'm only a few blocks from George Floyd Square,
Mm.
and friends and I want to activate that space on his death anniversary in May. One little step that shows our connection, shows our love, and shows that we're here for the fight and we are here for each other. So I'm inspired by art and art trumping politics. I'm inspired by novelists. I'm inspired by engaged academics and some of the writing they do, some of the talking they offer us. I'm inspired by the stars, the moon, by the sounds of nature, bird calls, the sounds of waves crashing. It's simple things. I'm inspired by too much to name.
There's a lot to be inspired by. There's beauty all around us.
All around, all the time, if you're open to it.
Yeah. We're friends, so I know this about you. uh, but we've also been talking about it a little bit in this conversation. Is just your commitment to the community. I know you had in your high respects group, you had a scholarship for high schoolers, and you know that you're trying to uplift the people around you. Could you talk a little bit about that and how you're thinking about that these days?
Okay. I would not be the musician I am today without the great resources of the Twin Cities community. I received tons of scholarships throughout my music education, throughout my education, and happy and thankful that I get to give back in the little ways that I've been able to. Not just little ways, meaningful ways as well. The High Respect Scholarship is, 15 years running so far, and no signs of stopping. That one's simple. It's, at one of our alma maters, St. Paul Central High, and our parameters are wide. We're just looking to support kids who are looking to pursue artful things, engaging things, activist things after they leave high school and as they continue their education. I have performed many times in support of other scholarship funds, also at Central. I've performed at my other alma mater, Burbridge Center for Arts Education, and the commission you mentioned earlier through the Greater Twin Cities Youth Symphonies. I've had the joy of getting to what I call complete the circle. I've had the chance to go back to all the institutions that were part of my upbringing and give back in some way. I taught at Walker West for a while. I was their artistic director for a moment. At McPhail Center for Music, I was their community liaison, helping them make their institution more reflective of the community in which it exists. I was an apprentice conductor with Minnesota Youth Symphonies for a couple of seasons. Who am I missing? Yeah, those are the biggies. And oh my gosh, Schubert Club was in my life from an early age because they are the stewards of an after-school music program called Project Cheer, which was was a beautiful program, is a beautiful program that was founded by my first piano teacher, Dr. Prentice Harris. And I love that program exists still and that it's still housed at the Hallie Q. Brown Center and Martin Luther King Center in St. Paul. in the neighborhood in which I grew up, Rondo. And it's if there is a fee for the families, it's pennies on the dollar. It's the opportunity for students to engage in piano lessons, guitar lessons, other instruments, other art activities, and it's beautiful. Yeah, I love this place. Recently, I've talked with friends about an organization that sadly isn't active these days. That was a big part of my education as a youth. So there's the National Association of Negro Musicians, and which has been around since 1919. And it's a presenter of classical music. They also have scholarship programs to allow musicians to study at conservatory if that is their desire, or university programs. And there are many local chapters throughout the country. And in the Twin Cities, our local chapter was called the Black Music Educators of the Twin Cities. And the years I was in that program or participating in those programs, I had my mind blown all the time.
Mm.
I was introduced to Black composers, Black performers, folks whose names we know now because they're having a moment of resurgence. But I grew up knowing names like Leontine Price, Marian Anderson, Florence Price, Harry Thacker Burley, long list, Nathaniel Dett, William Grant Steele, the godfather of African American composers. So I grew up performing their music, um, studying their music, being introduced to their lives and understanding how they existed in this country when it was even more challenging to be a Black musician in the classical world, when everyone wanted to just pigeonhole you to being either a jazz musician or you know, sing Negro spirituals but leave the leader alone. No, we can do it all. I was also introduced to uh, musicians like Roscoe Mitchell and Henry Threadgill through that group. So the AACM, the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians. So many of my friends, Black and brown creators, composers, performers, didn't hear a lot of these names until they got to college, if even then. Some of them not until they're out in the world as
Mm-hmm.
professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand just how well I was cared for as a student.
Mm-hmm.
So future me would love to revitalize that organization, but current me doesn't have the strength or the energy. It's hard enough taking
You
care of
don't have the
myself.
juice right now.
Not right now, and it doesn't have to be just me.
Yeah, right. That's a good goal.
It is a good goal.
I was going to ask you about your upbringing in the Twin Cities and how, what was that like, and how did it open the doors for you in terms of your art life, or not open the doors? I don't know what happened there.
Like I touched on just now, talking about Project Cheer and BMETC, I we also talk about, my friends and I, we talk about loss. We talk about how good it was when we were kids. I'm at that age. I never thought I'd get to that point. I'm not bitter. I'm not mad. We're just recognizing that the kids now don't have it as good as we did. As schools continue to get rid of art programs and get rid of after-school programs due to funding restraints, but also due to ideology shifts. Um, I had the privilege of there being a piano in the house before I was born. My sister was a happy failed piano student. Had her time, but parents being nice didn't force her to practice, and she wasn't,
She
didn't
didn't
self
want to.
motivate. She didn't want to do it. She had other things. Basketball was more of an imperative than playing the piano. So there was always this little weird magical box in the corner of the dining room that I was touching from my earliest memories. And then as my sister and my mom have retold, or maybe when I was 4, I said, Mom, make my sister teach me how to play the piano. And she said, well, no, if you're really, really intrigued and inspired, we'll find you a teacher. And that's how we found Dr. Harris, who was already in retirement but lived, just 3 blocks away. She was willing to meet with me and saw the spark and said, okay, well, I'll make an exception for this young man. And she was my first teacher and held me for a few years before she was like, okay, now I need to get back to this
To
to
this
this
retirement
retirement.
business.
But that's when she ushered me over to Project Cheer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a voracious little learner. So, a 15-minute shared piano bench lesson was worked for a while, for like a couple months, but then the teacher's like, okay, we're going to need you to come at the end of the day and we're going to give you at least a half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And then they
Just you.
said, yeah. And then after that wasn't enough, they said, okay, have you heard of Walker West Music Academy? To which my mom said, yes. My sister had also been a student of Reverend Walker before the academy existed. So around the age of 8, I didn't stop my lessons at Project Cheer. I kept those going, and I just also started lessons at Walker West. So I studied piano and B3 organ with Reverend Walker. And then a year or so later, I was in 4th grade, and that was the first time that school band was offered to me. So they come around with the little photos of all the instruments, and your 10-year-old self chooses whatever is the most shiny and most alluring instrument. For me, it was the alto sax. So I started lessons with Felix James at Walker West on saxophone. And Felix remained my most influential mentor and teacher throughout my high school, throughout the rest of my, K through 12 years. Um, I would not be here without him and his encouragement. So it started on saxophone, and then eventually I picked up the flute. And at one point, I wanted to get into the orchestra, and, no place in the orchestra for saxophones, not often. And there are too many flutes. They're
So
all
many flutes.
booked up. So many flutes. Everybody and their mama plays the flute. So I went to the orchestra directors. I said, how can I get into your ensembles tomorrow? And they
Yeah.
said,
What
pick
do
up
you
a
need?
bassoon, pick up a bassoon, a trombone, or a cello, and we got a space for you.
Doesn't matter
Felix had,
if you don't even know how to
no,
play it or you don't even
doesn't
know what
matter.
it is.
We'll show you how to put it together at the first rehearsal. It's fine. Yeah, Felix had a spare student model bassoon collecting dust in a closet. So that was my first instrument. And boy, oh boy, is a plastic bassoon a terrible sounding instrument. But I got through those initial months.
Yeah. Got to start somewhere.
Gotta start somewhere. And again, I was already pretty savvy at 13, so I knew it would be best to find a teacher before, trying to figure out, or YouTube didn't exist, so I couldn't
Yeah.
couldn't figure out how to put this thing together myself.
How to play the bassoon.
How to play. Shoot, there wasn't even AOL at the time. So
Yeah.
it would have been me, pulling out the phone book or something. So one of my good buddies at the time, Martin Devaney, beautiful singer-songwriter, had, just happenstance. His next door neighbor, Kathy Greenbank, was principal oboe of the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. And he said, I bet she knows someone. I bet she can at least point you to, her bandmates. So I met Kathy, and she said, you serious about this? I said, I'm serious about this. And she said, okay. And she gave me the name of her orchestra mate, Carol Mason Smith, who was the second bassoon in the orchestra. And Carol said, okay, we can have an intake lesson. She said, just do me one favor. Don't touch the instrument until you come to my house for that first lesson. I said, okay, I can do that. Of course, I'd already touched it and tried to put it together and tried to make some noises happen, but no luck. And yeah, Carol was an amazing and beautiful teacher. So kind, so loving, so gentle. And I had to eventually disappoint her because I didn't want to be a bassoon major. But I honored her and her efforts. I did take some auditions, and she's like, "Well, you have to at least go and meet my teacher." He was still teaching. Bernard Garfield was still teaching at Curtis, so I took the Curtis audition, traveled to Philadelphia to play for him, and that was a trip.
Mm.
Loved that.
Hmm.
But I, at 18, already had my mind set up that I was going to be a conductor and a composer, and
Mm.
the bassoon was going to go back to the back burner along with all these other instruments because I had focus.
Back into the closet with you.
Who am I missing? So, yeah, those are all my prominent teachers. The only folks I'm leaving out are after I had a couple months on bassoon, I had my first orchestra audition, and I was with Minnesota Youth Symphonies.
Mm-hmm.
And so from sophomore year of high school, I was in the youth orchestra. And
Mm-hmm.
wow.
And playing bassoon in youth orchestra?
Playing the bassoon, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I loved every rehearsal and every performance.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a beautiful experience to be amongst 80 other musicians in the service of the music.
That's an experience that I wish I'd had. I didn't really do that. I didn't have, yeah. I was straight up piano. There's not much for us in that regard. We've got the whole orchestra in front of us. What do we need these other people for? You mentioned conducting, which I didn't really know that you went to school for.
I thought that was my dream gig, was to be a conductor, an orchestral opera conductor, because it looked so sexy, deVon? Right?
But specifically opera.
Specifically all of it. And including new music.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. So sophomore year of high school, I was in the orchestra, and I must have approached the conductor immediately. I was like, "So, I'm here playing the bassoon because that was my window in or my way in, but I want to do what you're doing." To which the conductor said, "Oh, wow, no students ever asked that before."
There's just one spot.
Yeah, there's just like coming after my job.
It's mine.
But they were very gracious, that organization at the time, and said, "Okay, we'll make a way. We'll make some space for you." So that just meant that I needed a little bit of tutoring before I could take the podium. You don't get up there and just wave your arms randomly. So I got to study with the conductor of the orchestra privately, and with their partner, who was also a conductor. And it was a good compliment because I was already studying composition privately at this point and doing score study. I was doing score study for years on my own before that, thank you to the public library and having, recordings and scores available. So I was already looking at Stravinsky scores and deciphering things, trying to figure out what transpositions are all about, figure out how to look at a full page of orchestral music and take it all in one fell swoop. Challenges that were made easier by being a video gamer. You have to take in information all the time, but focus but unfocus all at the same time. So what was the first piece that deVon got to study with his conducting teachers and eventually wave his arms in front of his peers? Good old first movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. A good one out of the gate, because it's hard. It's hard to get that engine revving.
I thought you might say The Rite of Spring because it's the soon solo, but
So many. That's funny that Beethoven 5 just came up recently. A friend was convinced this whole time, into their mid-40s, that opening figure was a triplet of some sort. Dun 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 dun. It feels like it could be, but no. We're in 2/4, and that first note is an eighth rest, and then dun 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 dun. So yeah, and it's all in one. So you're just really just doing this the whole time. So it's how do you control an orchestra when you just moving your arm up and down? That's a very tricky piece, but a good introduction. So that was my sophomore year of high school.
Yeah,
And then
senior
through the
time.
rest of that season, I got to conduct a little of Dvorak, Eighth Symphony. What else do I remember? Those are the standouts. But then the next season, I was in the top group, the symphony orchestra. The
Hmm.
symphony plays, more complex repertoire and occasionally a full piece, not just movements or adaptations or arrangements. So I got to conduct Mahler First Symphony, Mahler Third Symphony. I got to conduct Scheherazade. I got to
Hmm.
conduct a lot of things. So anytime we'd be in rehearsal and the conductor wanted to step into the hall to get a better picture of the sound, he'd say, "deVon, get up here." Love that.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet you were essential. I'm curious how you see yourself in the music world right now, because you talk about you're thinking about going back to school, and I know that things have changed and shifted um, in our music world over the past even just 5 or 10 years, from definitions and pigeonholing. But how do you see yourself in the classical music world? And as you're getting ready to go back to school, are they classical music programs? And like, what are you seeing for yourself in that space?
They're absolutely not classical music programs. They call themselves things like sonic practices or sound art. So it's just a general blanket. It's an umbrella. So you could be making any sort of music or have
Mm-hmm.
any sort of practice.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I needed to wait until I found the right program or the right space that had the
Right.
sort of
Right.
freedom that I need now.
Yeah.
Um, how do I see myself in the classical world? I really don't. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so on the fringe. But again, at this after a lifetime of thinking that I was in there, that I was in
Mm-hmm.
the heart of it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I love that I still get the occasional commission from a straight ahead sort of classical ensemble.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that I confound them all with the deliverables because they're expecting some sort of notated regular in the box something something and they get something else.
Yeah.
Um, but as my friend Loki Coronia says, uh, hip hop is American classical music, jazz is American classical music. Pretty much all of Black American music is classical music. It is our classical music.
Mm-hmm.
So I've hated that term classical all my life because I've known that it's a misnomer. I've known better. The classical era was a moment in time,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
No offense to dear brother Mozart, a classicist. No offense to dear brother Beethoven, a romantic or transitionary artist from classical to romantic. No offense to folks who didn't even get the benefit of a good title. They were just called 20th century music. We're talking about Stravinsky's and Schoenberg's now. What a trip. And now we're in the space in the era where they just call it new music. Again, they chose wrong. That's such a dumb thing to call it.
It
All
can't be
new
called that
music is
forever.
new music. No, new music is new music. New songs, new songwriter, new folk music is new music. It's all new music. Um, and there have been folks who try to say, well, it's art music or it's something. No, all music is art music. It's all
Mm-hmm.
artful.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
I
mean, I
don't know.
wonder if that term is chosen because it's more inclusive, but I don't know.
You would like to think so, but we know that
Yeah.
the world is not inclusive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I there are still some things that I have not been able to detach myself from or my heart from. So it's with deep within me, I still yearn for and desire a commission from a string orchestra.
Mm,
That is one of my most beloved ensembles on the earth. I'm talking about Western classical string orchestra, so violins, violas, cellos, double basses.
mhm.
That is where homogeneity works well. Um, but it's also such a rich palette capable of so many textures and sonic creations. The bigger orchestra, the Philharmonic, the symphony orchestra with its winds and percussion and its brass. Eh, I'm not so drawn to that anymore. Um, if an opportunity arises or if someone comes to me with a good offer, I would consider it. Um, but it's an outdated institution that got stuck in the early 20th century and hasn't shifted or changed much. Every now and again, we'll see composers make an offering where they're trying to incorporate electronics or other things in the orchestra, but the orchestra roster remains the same as winds, brass, percussion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing orchestras that have Ableton artists or electronic artists on the roster. Sorry, did not mean to omit the harpists and the pianists who are also part of the symphony orchestras.
We're often not in there though.
Yeah, very true. Um, Classical world, yeah,
Yeah, it's an
and
interesting.
and
It's an
opera
interesting
too. That's a title that I will not use myself. I'd much rather call the work multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, a staged something, a musical theatrical presentation. Yeah. But it's not musical theater either. That's not its own bag. Bless their hearts. Um, I don't know, because I love all those instruments. I still love the bassoon. I love English horns and some of the flutes. Not the piccolos, not the C flutes, but alto flute, bass flute, they can get it.
one.
Bass clarinet,
But the
I'm
five,
listening.
like the
Right.
five. Yeah.
um, what else? Brass. I could leave the trumpets, but trombones and tubas, I'm listening. French horns, yeah, y'all can come. I learned this from who was it? Toru Takemitsu, beautiful composer. He had no love for the timpani. He's like, why is the timpani still a thing? Why is it kettle drum? I'm not writing for that. I agree. I'm not writing for the fucking timpani. I don't give a fuck about the timpani. I swear to God. Or film music and all the toms and tom drums. I'm like, nah, that's not the sound. Cymbals, suspended cymbals. Yeah, nope. Yeah. Anyway, so I know what my palette needs and what it doesn't.
Yeah, you're very clear on that.
Very clear.
Love it. And this conversation sort of goes full circle with your bio about the paper music and the
Yeah.
rejection of the paper music, you know.
And yes, and oh my God, try to be a non-traditional composer and try
Or
to get
orchestra.
something performed or read by an orchestra. Good luck to you.
Mm-hmm. Well, you did
Um,
it.
I did, and as soon as I again delivered the deliverables, the conductor called me and said, yeah, man, we need to talk." He said, "One, this is maybe the most challenging score I've ever seen, and two, the kids are gonna struggle with this." And I said, "I don't care."
Yeah.
And he said, "Will you do me the solid of attending the first rehearsal?" And I said, "Composers don't do that. We don't like to be tortured in that way. But yes, I will make an exception this time because I gave y'all something so out of the box."
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the kids who were the most terrified by my score were the students who came up as Suzuki string players who need
Mm-hmm.
music in front of them to know what to do.
Mm.
But in the performance notes, I tell you everything you need to know, you already know. There's nothing new you need to learn. Just bring yourself to the piece.
Mm-hmm.
Come with an open heart.
Follow these
And
instructions.
yes,
Yeah.
and leave all the rest at the threshold. And that first rehearsal was beautiful. And I brought my friend Nate Ryan, photographer and videographer, to capture some of it, to capture the cacophony, to capture the wall of sound that they created because they didn't understand what tacit means. In the score, I asked them to play for a short amount of time and then to rest for an equal amount of time so that you're allowing space for your stand mates and for your friends to get a chance to speak, and for folks to not have to speak over each other.
Mm-hmm.
So really, that score works only through decisions by committee, decisions by smaller groups. So we had to have little breakout sessions where they figured out a little roadmap. How are we going to get through the piece? What are the choices we're going to make as a collective? What are the choices we're going to make as smaller collectives within the greater collective? And what are choices that I get to make as an individual?
Mm-hmm. Wow, what a cool way to approach a piece of music with an
Right?
orchestra. Yeah.
And a valuable lesson that I learned from that process and that commission. Um, Thank you to my friend Alan Tyson, because we have our friends and mentors who we go to when we are feeling frustrated or we have written ourselves into a corner. I said, man, I am having a really hard time trying to figure out how to frame this piece. I know what I want it to do or how I want it to function, but I don't know what it should look like on the page. And I had recently had a beautiful experience getting to play the music of George Lewis with Beloved's Zeitgeist New Music at a concert at the Walker. Um, and that piece of George's, Shadowgraph number 5, ended up being my framework for this
Mm,
piece.
mm,
And so I went to Alan and I said, okay, I've looked at this score a lot, I've studied it, and I've tried to come at it in new ways and tried to find my own way to create this thing. I'm having a really hard time. George laid it out so clearly, and his score is so efficient. And Alan said, man, stop. Let me stop you right there. He said, you're blocking yourself by thinking that every time we pick up a pen, we're supposed to be an innovator. He
mm-hmm.
said that may be just one of the mistakes of the music education process, thinking that composers are supposed to innovate with every piece, innovate you know, with something new. It's supposed to bring something new. He said, sometimes a creator is an innovator and is definitely forging a new path through a forest that was full grown. And then, you look back, that creator looks back and, oh, look, I've forged a path. There's a clear way from where I began to where I am now. And he said, and sometimes others of us come along on that cleared path and we begin building from there. So it doesn't always have to be innovation at 100, or you don't have to make the way yourself. Take some guidance from those who came before you. Start building on the cleared path instead of thinking you have to find a new path in this forest.
Mm-hmm.
I will carry that with me the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, yes, I may be an innovator and may find a new way, but other moments it's not that. It's standing on the shoulders of those who came before me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my piece looks a lot like George's. And it's just in the minutia and the details where I found new framing. And really, the thing I love most about my scores, the instructions I give to the students, the first thing that they're supposed to do after they get the score and take a moment to look it over and read it is to plan to go on a walk. So I want them to go on a walk somewhere beautiful, somewhere they love, somewhere comfortable and safe. And while they're on this walk, either by themselves or with friends or family, they're supposed to be on the lookout for 2 rocks, or 2 small stones that can fit into one hand. And I use them. They're supposed to bring those rocks to the rehearsal. And at some point, they play the rocks like they're a percussion instrument. And again, we create this sort of cacophony because it's 80 musicians banging rocks together. So it sounded like rain hitting a tin roof. It sounded like the patter of rain. It sounded like ocean sounds a little bit. And then at some point, the cacophony and the randomness of everybody hitting their rocks in their own time comes together in a great pulse that the collective gathers into one space, one time. And then from there, the piece goes on.
Mm-hmm.
So again, anything I can do to get folks out into the world, into nature,
Mm-hmm.
being thoughtful, being loving, being kind, that feels good to me.
Yeah, and bringing the creative process to all of that.
My sister and some family was at the premiere, and she said to me, I don't think I've ever seen an audience interactive orchestra piece before, because the piece really begins with the conductor taking the podium, gathering himself for a minute. The first instruction is for the musicians on stage to look around at each other and share some smiles, and then they begin doing some box breathing. So in for a count of 7, hold your breath for a few beats, and then exhale. And then the conductor turns around to the audience and gets them to participate in it as well. And then after that, the students start doing this with their hands, which I call hand blocks. So it's like sand blocks, but with your hands. And then the conductor turns to the audience, gets them to participate. And it's a very gentle sound because it's, even with 80 musicians, it's still barely audible. But then when you get a full orchestra hall, which it was doing this, they're able to get these big wells and swells of this hand block sound, which is really, really beautiful. That was fun. I hope the piece gets life and gets to live another moment with some other performers someday.
Yeah. I'm very curious if the conductor had prior experience working on scores like this with orchestras, and or like who had more difficulty with it, the conductor or the students, not knowing who the conductor is. Yeah. I don't want to make assumptions here.
Good question. The conductor was Hisham Bravo Groover. Beautiful conductor, beautiful musician. He'd absolutely had no experience with a score like this. That's why he called me in a bit of a
Panic?
mild panic. And he's like, yeah, you're definitely going to need to walk me through this and give us a little guidance. So I was like, oh, yeah, that's fine. But he handled it beautifully. And I really, through the nature of what the score is, I pretty much wrote him out of it. Like, he doesn't have much. There's no reason for him to wave his arms at all. He just, sort of starts them on the journey and gives a couple cues here and there. But other than that, they could have done it on their own.
Was there any conduction in that?
No conduction. I'm also a big fan of conduction. Thank you to Ancestor Butch Morris for that technique. But I love the opportunities where I've seen orchestras being led through conduction. More of that, because I also know for a fact that when the SPCO had Tyshawn Sori leading them in conduction, they were nonplussed.
Yeah.
But they made beautiful music even though they were reluctant.
Yeah.
And the second time, it won't be such a heavy lift.
Yeah, I feel like when a lot, I won't say this for everybody because there's definitely classical players out there who are like really comfortable with improvisation, but I think as kind of a general concept, I feel like when classical musicians are confronted with something that asks them to improvise, they freeze.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do. It's like they don't even know what this instrument is that's in front of them. What do I do?
Yeah, pretty much all of my scores have improvisation in them at some point. Even my string quartet Fractious Child, which is, I'd say, 96% notated. That other 4% seems like a small percentage, but it that doesn't mean that the moment needed to be small. The players actually chose to make those moments sort of big, and they lasted for quite a moment. My piano pieces, Even This Laughter, Even Your Tears, the ones that Lara Downs performed, my dear friend and brother Anthony Green has also performed them extensively. He's performed them on a few continents now, which I appreciate him for that. He took the assignment to heart. Because again, in that score, I lay out in the performance notes that this score, though it is fully notated, is just a framework, that it should be seen as more like a jazz lead sheet. When I play those pieces, I don't play them the same way twice, and I offer that same freedom to whomever's playing them. Lara chose to play them like they're a sonata, or like it's just, she played the notes on the page, and that's fine. But I'd say that's like the base level. When Anthony has performed the pieces, I, at moments, can barely recognize him, and that is the assignment, and he took it to heart.
He's a really committed musician.
Mm-hmm. He reads between the lines, and he reads all the lines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If people want to see and hear your work, or learn more about you, where is a good place for them to find that information?
Right now, the best place is to Google me.
Mm-hmm.
I have survived my first decade as a independent composer without a website. That's been my choice. I've chosen to keep myself small, to keep my name out of the mouth of critics and folks who call themselves experts who are not experts. But I will be opening up myself to the world a little more in the coming months and years.
Mm-hmm.
Recordings that exist are the Lara Downs, and the Trio album is a good representation of my playing.
Where can people buy those?
I love Bandcamp as a
Mm-hmm.
good place to support musicians in a positive way, though all of these things can be accessed through any of the streaming services, even the dreaded one.
Whose name we shall not speak.
Whose name shall not speak, though they support weapons of mass destruction. It's fine. It's not fine. Where else can folks find me?
So look up deVon Russell Gray online, or deVon Russell Gray music, and
Yes.
they'll find you. They'll
find some things.
deVon, thank you so much. This was really fun. I really enjoyed speaking with you always, and I love you. And and yeah, it was great. To the audience, thank you for listening, and this has been another edition of the Sanguine Arts Locavart podcast.